The sea was a wild, living creature that night, black as ink, roaring like a wounded beast, throwing its waves against the edge of the world. Above this restless ocean rose the solitary lighthouse of Ethershore, tall and aged, its massive lens sweeping through the darkness like a watchful eye. And inside that tower, a lantern burned quietly, casting a warm glow across polished wooden floors and old stone walls. Xiao Zhan had grown used to the quiet music of this place. The whisper of the sea, the creak of the tower, the hum of the rotating lamp overhead. But tonight felt different. The air was charged. The waves were too loud. The wind was too sharp. Something was coming. He felt it deep in his chest long before he heard the distant thunder. He stepped out onto the balcony, coat fluttering wildly, and stared into the horizon where the sky cracked open with forks of silver lightning. 4 years, Ethershore had been a graveyard of ships, until the day Xiao Zhan took responsibility for the lighthouse. He had saved countless sailors, fishermen, wanderers, and once, long ago, someone who had changed his life forever. Someone he hadn't seen in years. Yibo. A name that still echoed in Xiao Zhan's heart like an unfinished melody. The sea below crashed violently, spraying cold mist into the air. The storm was building faster than any he had seen this season. He rushed inside and pulled down maps, checking currents, tides, wind direction. Something was wrong. And then it appeared. A flicker of red on the distant water. Flare. Someone was out there. Xiao Zhan grabbed his coat and raced down the spiraling stone stairs, each footstep echoing through the tower. As he reached the shoreline, the wind punched him sideways and the sea's voice became a deafening roar. But the flare kept burning, a desperate, trembling cry for help. He pushed a small boat into the water and rowed into the storm, muscles burning, heart racing. Lightning tore across the sky, illuminating the violent waves. A massive swell lifted his boat high, then slammed it back down with bone-rattling force. But he pushed through. The flare was growing closer, brighter, and suddenly he saw him. A man clinging to a piece of broken mast, hair plastered to his face by rain, body trembling from exhaustion. And then the lightning flashed again, revealing his face clearly. Xiao Zhan's chest tightened. It was him. Yibo. The one he saved years ago. The one who disappeared without saying goodbye. The one who left a silence that never stopped echoing. Xiao Zhan rowed with every ounce of strength he had. The waves tried to swallow them both, but he reached out, grabbing Yibo's arm just as another wave crashed over them. With a final pull, he hauled him into the boat. Wang Yibo collapsed against him, shivering violently. Xiao Zhan wrapped his arms around him, shielding him from the storm. "You came back," Xiao Zhan whispered, barely audible over the thunder. Yibo lifted his head slowly, water dripping from his lashes, eyes filled with something heavy, regret, relief, longing. "I had to," Yibo breathed. "I needed to see you." For a moment the storm felt quiet. But the sea was not done with them. A monstrous wave rose behind the boat like a towering giant. Xiao Zhan braced himself, gripping the ropes. The wave crashed down, flipping the boat sideways. They plunged into the icy water. Below the surface, everything became silent, cold, endless. Xiao Zhan fought his way up, searching desperately. His lungs felt like they were on fire. He pushed toward the surface, and then a hand grabbed his. They broke through the water together, gasping for air. The overturned boat drifted nearby. They clung to it, riding the violent swells until the storm, exhausted from its own fury, finally began to weaken. By the time they reached the shore, they were barely standing. Xiao Zhan threw Yibo's arm over his shoulders and half carried him back to the lighthouse. The wind had changed. It carried a strange calmness now, as though the ocean itself was watching them. Inside the lighthouse, Xiao Zhan wrapped Yibo in warm blankets, placed him by the fireplace, and heated water for tea. Yibo's eyes followed him quietly the entire time, never looking away, never blinking too long. As if afraid Xiao Zhan might vanish if he did. Xiao Zhan finally sat across from him. "You almost died out there," he said softly. Yibo exhaled. I know. But I had no choice. Why? Xiao Zhan asked, voice trembling despite himself. Why come back now? The fire crackled, shadows dancing across the stone walls. Yibo looked into the flames, then at Xiao Zhan, and the weight of years rested behind his gaze. Because the last time I left, Yibo began, I made a mistake. Xiao Zhan's throat tightened. He remembered that day too clearly, waking up to find Yibo gone, the lighthouse suddenly emptier than it had ever been. I wasn't ready, Yibo continued. To stay. Choose a place. To choose a person. Xiao Zhan's heartbeat stumbled. But I kept thinking about you. About this lighthouse. About how you saved me once and how I wanted to come back to save you too. Save me, Xiao Zhan whispered. From what? From loneliness, Yibo said, the words soft but sharp as truth. I know how this place eats at your heart. How it feels to carry light for the whole sea, but have no one carry light for you. Silence settled between them. A gentle, fragile silence. Yibo reached out, fingers trembling slightly. Let me stay this time. Xiao Zhan felt the world stop. But just as he opened his mouth to reply, the ground beneath them trembled. A deep, thunderous sound rumbled from the cliffs outside. Yibo's eyes widened. What was that? Xiao Zhan stood, instantly alert. The sea caves, they're collapsing. He grabbed a lantern. Stay here. But Yibo pushed himself up, determination burning through the exhaustion. I'm coming with you. No, you're hurt. I survived a storm, Yibo said, meeting his eyes with the same stubbornness he once had years ago. I won't lose you to a cave. Xiao Zhan hesitated, then nodded. They ran out into the night, the lighthouse behind them blazing like a pillar of hope. The cliffs shook again, dust falling from the stone edges. Xiao Zhan led the way toward the entrance of the caves, where he suspected some fishermen might have taken shelter from the storm. The ground cracked as they stepped inside. The cave walls groaned like the earth was tearing itself apart. Water dripped from above, and the lantern flickered wildly. Suddenly, a section of the cave ceiling collapsed. A boulder crashed down where Xiao Zhan had been standing, but Yibo shoved him out of the way just in time. They both tumbled across the floor. Xiao Zhan gasped. Yibo! I'm fine, Yibo breathed, though he clearly wasn't. His arm was bleeding, but he still pushed forward. They found two fishermen trapped behind fallen rocks. With combined effort, Yibo pulling despite the pain, Xiao Zhan pushing with all his strength, they freed them and guided them toward the exit. But as they approached the mouth of the cave, another deep tremor surged through the ground. The lantern shattered. Darkness swallowed them. A massive crack split the floor. Xiao Zhan slipped. Yibo grabbed him, pulling him back from the collapsing edge. Their bodies collided, chests heaving, breaths mixing in the cold cave air. The fire in the lighthouse crackled softly, sending tiny sparks dancing upward as if they were trying to escape into the high stone ceiling. The storm outside had quieted, but the echo of its fury still clung to the air like a ghost. The scent of rain mixed with sea salt lingered in every corner. And between the shadows thrown by the golden flame sat Xiao Zhan and Wang Yibo, both wrapped in silence, both wrapped in questions. The lantern light painted Yibo's face in warm hues, softening the sharp edges of exhaustion. His clothes clung to him, still damp, and every now and then he shivered despite the thick blanket around his shoulders. Xiao Zhan watched him closely, his mind replaying the moment he found Yibo clinging to the broken mast in the waves. The moment he thought he'd lose him. Again. A silence thicker than fog settled between them, but it wasn't empty. It buzzed with unspoken truths, unasked questions, and the weight of years that lay between them. You shouldn't be alive, Xiao Zhan finally said, voice low. The storm was vicious. Even experienced sailors wouldn't have survived. Yibo lifted his eyes, slow and deliberate. I didn't survive it, he whispered. You saved me. The words struck Xiao Zhan's heart like a soft, aching blow. You always do. Xiao Zhan swallowed hard, unsure if the sudden warmth in his chest was pride or pain. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again," he admitted, barely above a whisper. "Not after the way you disappeared." Yibo looked down at the flames, his fingers tightening around the blanket. "I know," he breathed. "And I regret it every day." The fire flickered, casting shifting shadows across his face. Guilt, longing, relief, and something deeper, hidden beneath the storm's residue. Xiao Zhan leaned back, his hand unconsciously brushing the old wooden table beside him. "What were you doing out there?" he asked. "In the middle of a storm like that?" Yibo hesitated. For the first time since he was pulled from the sea, fear flashed across his eyes. Not of death, not of the ocean, but of the truth itself. "I was looking for you," he said. Xiao Zhan froze. The sea outside groaned softly against the cliffs, almost as if the ocean itself leaned closer to listen. "You were what?" Xiao Zhan managed. Yibo met his gaze, eyes burning with sincerity. "I came back for you. I came back to explain everything. I thought if I didn't do it now, I'd never get the chance." Xiao Zhan's breath caught. Part of him wanted to turn away. Part of him wanted to protect himself from the fresh wound forming beneath the old one. But another part, the part that had spent endless nights staring at the sea, remembering Yibo's laughter echoing through the lighthouse halls, leaned in slightly, unable to resist. "Explain then," Xiao Zhan murmured. Yibo inhaled, steadying himself. The fire reflected in his eyes, flickering like a fragile confession. "When I left this lighthouse years ago, I wasn't running from the place," he said. "I was running from myself. From feelings I didn't know how to face. I thought distance would make them disappear." Xiao Zhan felt the world tilt. The sound of the waves outside faded. Even the fire seemed to quiet. "What feelings?" he asked, heart pounding. Yibo's chest rose and fell with a deep breath. "Feelings that pulled me toward you. Feelings I wasn't ready to understand back then." The room became unbearably, beautifully still. Xiao Zhan's fingers curled slightly on the table. "Yibo." "But leaving only made everything worse," Yibo continued, voice trembling. "Every place I went reminded me of this lighthouse. Every coastline, every harbor. Kept seeing your face, hearing your voice. It was like the sea itself refused to let me move on." Xiao Zhan felt something warm bloom inside him, something he had tried so hard to bury. "So I came back," Yibo said. "I came back because I couldn't run anymore. And because I missed you." Heartbeat. Then another. The fire popped softly as if nudging Xiao Zhan to respond. He stood up slowly, the weight of Yibo's confession pulling him forward. He crossed the small space between them, his footsteps soft on the wooden floor. When he reached Yibo, he knelt down so they were eye level. "Why didn't you come sooner?" Xiao Zhan whispered. Yibo's voice cracked. "Because I was afraid you wouldn't want me back." The vulnerability in his words sliced straight through Xiao Zhan's carefully constructed walls. "I waited," Xiao Zhan said softly. "Longer than I ever should have. Longer than I thought my heart could endure." Yibo lifted his hand, slowly, hesitantly, like he feared Xiao Zhan might disappear if he moved too fast. His fingers brushed against Xiao Zhan's cheek. Gentle, trembling, real. "I'm here now," he whispered. The sea crashed softly in the distance. The wind brushed against the lighthouse windows with a tender sigh. And for the first time in years, Xiao Zhan felt warm in a way the fire alone could never give him. He lifted his hand and placed it over Yibo's. "Then stay," Xiao Zhan murmured. "Just stay." Yibo's eyes softened, tears gathering at the edges. He tried to blink away. "I will," he said. "I promise you. I'm not leaving again." Xiao Zhan helped him stand, steadying him when he swayed from lingering exhaustion. He guided him toward the small bed near the window, the same bed Yibo once slept in years ago, the same one that had remained untouched since he left. "You need rest," Xiao Zhan said quietly. Yibo lay down, the blanket still wrapped around him. His eyes drifted half-closed, heavy with fatigue but soft with peace. Before he fell asleep, he whispered, "Don't go far." Xiao Zhan sat beside him, watching the soft rise and fall of his chest, the calm settling back into his features. "I'm not going anywhere," Xiao Zhan said. The lighthouse hummed faintly, the beam sweeping across the ocean like a guardian's eye. The storm had ended, but something far more powerful had begun. The return, the confession, the fragile hope between two souls reunited by fate. Outside, the moon broke through the clouds, laying a silver path across the sea, a quiet blessing from the heavens. And inside, Xiao Zhan watched over Yibo, the warmth of the fire reflecting in his eyes, the lighthouse once again alive with light, purpose, and the promise of a new beginning. If you enjoyed this continuation, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more amazing stories, dramatic scenes, and breathtaking adventures.